Welcome back to the Smarter HR Podcast, the podcast where organizations that might sometimes compete against each other have come together to share insights on meaningful topics that are relevant to the business world we're in today. I'm Rod Lacey. I'm the founder and CEO of Sunstone HR Consulting, and I'm excited to bring this group together again in this podcast. Now, before I introduce the others in the group here, you can follow these podcasts on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe so that you get every one of these coming to your inbox. And on Spotify, you can listen there too. Follow these so that they come right to your inbox when they're on as well there. Well, let's introduce ourselves real quick. Steve and Stephanie are some of the founding members of this group. Steve, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Stephanie for a brief intro.
Yeah, Steve Pleim. I am the president of Talent Team, which is a recruiting and staffing firm headquartered in West Valley City.
And I am Stephanie Lyon. I'm a business development consultant with Stratus HR, and Stratus HR is an outsourced HR company.
And we've got a special guest with us today and for the next few episodes. Kathleen, will you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yes. Happy to be here. My name is Kathleen Warren, and I'm an employment law attorney with the global law firm of Ogletree Deakins.
Excellent. Welcome, Kathleen. Good to have you with us. So we try to select topics for this podcast that are meaningful and relevant to businesses, and we have one of those today. Steve's going to talk about and lead a discussion on this first period of employment that I think is really thought-provoking. So, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we're going to go with today's topic?
Yeah, today's topic, pardon me, is called the first 3 months. And we're going to talk a little bit about how important that is and how to kind of get your arms around it and make it work. The basic idea being, if we're not intentional about how that works out, and we just kind of throw it to the wind and hope, well, let's just say it doesn't work out as well that way. So you may remember, Rod, we used to say to new people, during the first 3 months, you're on probation.
I had one of those periods early in my career, yes.
Yeah, like you committed a crime.
Yep.
Yeah. But the first 3 months, they're not about punishment. For the employee, it's about whether I like this job, right? Especially the entry-level employees, they don't have, the people around the table are able to walk up to somebody and shake their hand, say hi, you have some confidence, you have social skills. Some of the entry-level people are still trying to develop that. We've had, in our staffing organization, we've had situations where new employees can't really figure out which door to go through. So what do you think they do? They get back in their car and they go home. So their attitude about life, or maybe the attitude isn't the right word, their view of how life works is different than the supervisor's view who's inside the building waiting. And especially in the winter when it's dark. It's hard to see what door I go in, and it's intimidating for people. So their point of view is really profound. Their feelings are kind of open. It's the first day of a new job. They're trying to figure out if they like it or not. Now, what about the supervisor inside the building? What's the supervisor's attitude? The first 3 months about figuring out whether this investment in this new employee is going to work out. So they're like, they got the side eye on you, going, how are you doing? Watching you kind of close. And sometimes the attitude is, if I don't see you working out, give me a new one. So they're entirely different approaches in those first 3 months. They're not only about determining whether the employee is going to work out, it's when the business is at a higher risk. There are lots of risks that are present in the first 3 months that are not present later. And there is data to support that adverse employment practice claims, injury claims, and various kinds of disruptions are more present with these new people in the groups. So here's another reason the first 90 days for the new employee are worth noting. There's a guy named Michael Watkins wrote a book called The First 90 Days. He says employee orientation centers around and exists to help the individual employee, but it is the company that ultimately reaps the benefits of the practice. We all know that retention curve shows quite a bit of turnover right at first, right? and then it tends to drop off pretty rapidly and gets not flat, but kind of closer as you go along, depending on the role. The kind of flatter may be way out here, or it may be kind of quick. But there is a heightened risk for new people. I think that's kind of the point. And maybe it suggests that as HR leaders, we should be looking for ways to manage that and protect
I
ourselves.
think it's super interesting, and I would agree that there are divergent views from the new hire to the supervisor. But what are some of those risks that that employer needs to be aware of? If we could dial that in just a little bit for that first 90 days.
Well, injury claims are certainly higher during that period. You don't know your way around the place. You haven't even found out where the bathroom is. And you don't know that maybe there's a pallet with a corner that hangs out sort of close to the walkway in this particular spot. And there goes a trip and fall. Everybody else knows it. They've been there for a while. They're more acclimated. There are also predatory people out there. Kathleen, you bump into them all the time. In your world, I know.
Yes, unfortunately, I do. And I think one of the certainly the probationary period not only sounds like a bad thing, but it's a little bit of a misnomer if you assume that during that probationary period you don't really have to take requests for accommodation, for example, seriously. And you may have an employee who comes in either with an immediate request for accommodation or shortly thereafter requests an accommodation. And it's a mistake and it's highly risky to assume, well, they're in their 90 days probationary period. I don't have to take this as seriously as I would an employee who's moved past that probationary period and is a permanent employee. So one of the risks that an employer has with a mindset that this is just a probationary test period is that they don't take certain legal obligations such as engaging in the interactive process, granting a reasonable accommodation, considering ADA leave. We've seen employees come in, they work 30, 40 days, and they need a leave of absence as a reasonable accommodation. They don't qualify for the FMLA, but the employer needs to engage in the interactive process, needs to consider whether leave is a reasonable accommodation, and that idea that they're just on a probationary period, we don't have to take that as seriously or check all the boxes that we normally would, can leave the employer at risk, especially if you do have a predatory employee.
Yeah, somebody is attempting to hurt you on purpose or benefit themselves, get money out of you.
Correct. And unfortunately, when a case lands on my desk, I see that quite often. And it is a situation where a predatory employee has been in this position before. It's worked. It's resulted in either litigation or settlement. And so that is something to be aware of.
Yeah, we don't want to suggest that all new people are a problem, of course. But we do want to suggest that maybe it's a time to just be a little bit more careful, a little bit more observant, a little more intentional.
Maybe just a thought. I mean, aside from, from the compliance standpoint, the risk of injury, I mean, something stood out to me. You're talking about the employee who's still trying to figure out where the bathroom is. I mean, for the employer, the employee's auditing you. So you're saying they're on the probationary period, but really an employer equally is on their probationary period.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe the employee ought to look at the employer and go, you know what, you're on a probationary period and you better treat me well.
It's a two-way street. It's a mutual test drive for sure.
Yes. We also should think maybe a little bit about things like cybersecurity. If there's a newer person whose intentions are not as pure, that's a place where they may see some vulnerabilities and go after you kind of quickly. So there are lots of risks. And I think the bottom line is, I don't know you yet. Let's see what you're like. We can't really know them until we spend some time around them. So keep your antenna up. That's the idea. But for the first several weeks, they're also not producing at full capacity, right? Pretty much every job has a knack to it. Were you as good at your first job, or not your first job, were you as good as at any of your jobs on the first day as you were after you had been there for a year?
No.
No, none
There's
of
no
those
way. And I think that's applicable at any level of the organization.
No question. So maybe for new folks, we ought to be paying attention to whether they're getting this knack, whether they're getting, you're a supervisor, you've seen other new people, you know how long it should take. If they don't get to the point where they're paying the company back through their productivity more than the company is paying them, then what the heck? What are you doing? Are you coaching them? Are you helping them turn into a real, actual resource? It's another element for us to keep our eye on, the productivity curve. There is a dynamic to it. As supervisory people, leadership people, we should know what that knack curve looks like and judge whether the new person is getting it or not.
I think you're talking about, measuring the productivity. I think where a lot of organizations fail, we're talking about 90 days. I mean, really, you should have a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And
No
within
question.
that plan, you should have specific goals, specific tasks, milestones, and there should be opportunities for mentorship. If those things aren't in place, then really, what are you measuring? How do you know if what you're measuring is correct? And how do you know if your structure needs to be tweaked?
I had a follow-up question too. Steve, you used the word knack. They have the knack for it. What is the knack in your mind, and is that something the organization should be teaching these new hires?
Well, I guess the first thing is you guys, in my staffing, where I'm wearing my staffing hat, we get inside lots of businesses and see their operational innards. And one of the things we sometimes note is that the supervisors don't consider whether they're hitting the knack. And if they were to consider it, they wouldn't know what the knack is. It's not really a difficult concept to get your arms around. I'm an experienced supervisor. We've been doing this in our company. Maybe you're processing mortgage applications. Well, how many mortgage applications do you have to process in order to be a profitable piece of this business's machinery? And if you don't have a metric to judge them against, now what is it? And it turns into, frankly, I kind of don't like you. You're something that bugs me.
So it's more of a qualitative, you're not working out kind of a mindset?
Yeah, or I just have a sense of it as a supervisor. And by the way, send me a new one because this one's not working out.
Yeah, I think Stephanie's point about mentorship and an opportunity to check in during the first 3 months or even 6 months. When I recently started at a new firm, I was still doing litigation, but I had a whole new system to learn and people to learn. And it was really nice when my mentor said, give yourself 6 months before you're going to feel comfortable or fast at your job. It's okay. And that was enormously helpful. And I think those kinds of check-ins and those opportunities to mentor during even the first 6 months, and whether you do it informally or more formally with, a literal check-in, and you have a worksheet and you go through that and you check the boxes, and that gives you an opportunity as a supervisor to really meet with that person and find out what their struggles are, what their obstacles are, and even offer that. Give yourself a little bit of time. It takes a little time to get the knack, for example.
Yeah, and that meant something even to you, a sophisticated person who's kind of been around the block. Imagine what that means to a new person who has some pretty sensitive feelings. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So the takeaway is every new person is not going to generate a return on investment, and early tenure is structurally risky. So if we recognize the risks and manage for a positive outcome, we get better outcomes. Investment in human resources, that's what HR stands for, right? Should be viewed like investing in other resources. There's a commissioning period. You start you spend CapEx money for a new piece of equipment, or you replace all of your computers to build AI into them because you think that's going to help. Do you monitor that?
I've always thought it was really fascinating for organizations because you look at your CFO or your finance team, they are managing the company's investments, and there's heavy scrutiny, spreadsheets, reports. They're first on the agenda in executive meetings. On the human capital side, we're managing sometimes a larger budget. We're one of the top 3 expenses for every business, and with exposures and all kinds of risks and opportunities and again, benefit expenses. But the same scrutiny and attention is not paid to that big investment and that pool of risk and money.
Yeah, so your new people are no less important than your new equipment, right?
It's very true.
We want to identify the good ones so we can nurture them. We want to identify the ones that aren't keepers so we can remove them quickly and manage the risks.
Yeah.
There's the takeaway.
So Steve, with all of this, obviously there's some big risks early on. We've talked about some of the disconnects that occur. Can we transition? What should we be doing? What should organizations be doing differently?
Yeah, that's, of course, the big question. Thanks for asking. Over and over again, we see that it's the involvement of those first-level supervisors that really makes a difference. You've heard that old expression, you don't quit your job, you quit your
manager, supervisor.
Yeah. And it's the one who is intended to have the highest first-level involvement with you on an everyday basis that creates that vibe.
Gallup statistics report that 70% of an employee's engagement is tied to that first-level supervisor. It's a very, very real connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how did that supervisor get that job? By being good at doing something, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, you're leaning into something. Unfortunately, most middle managers are underdeveloped. So the leader who's leading the new people is really the blind leading the blind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What does supervisor mean? There are 2 roots in that word supervisor: super and visor. Super, higher than. Visor is vision. The supervisor is supposed to have vision that's higher level than the groups that they are supervising. Another word we hear for that level of folks is lead. You're a lead. Well, we know what lead is the root of, leadership. Yeah, so you're really good at making those medical devices. Let's make you a, supervisor, lead. But we're not going to tell you how to do that. We're just going to make you that.
Organizations get a lot of credit for internal promotions, right? We try to do that, but you're right, Steve. Being a good producer or individual contributor doesn't make you qualified automatically for that supervisory role, but we do that. We do that whether it's tenure-based or whether it's based on the high performer of the team, and then we roll the dice and hope they succeed. I've never been in an organization that did not need more supervisor development.
Absolutely.
Well, and the law treats supervisors as the company.
That's a good point. Yes.
Once the supervisor says something or does something, it's the company acting. So
true.
The legal status of a supervisor is very significant as well.
Yeah.
It's a big leap of faith these organizations are taking with that could be underqualified promotion into that new role.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes down to, having a well thought out career pathing training. We see this all the time. Stratus has created leadership training around this because we see that somebody will promote somebody into leadership and then they're not happy that this individual doesn't have the skill set to manage the people underneath them. So it's a huge skill gap without having, proper processes and trainings in place.
So we can make an enormous difference in this period by just collecting a couple pieces of pretty simple data, and one of them is the NAC. And a wonderful thing happens to that supervisory group when you do this. If you go to the supervisors and say, once a month we're going to get together and we're going to ask you how all of your reports, your 1 to 3 month reports, are doing with regard to 2 particular data points. One of them is the NAC. The other one is the fit. The NAC stands for how well are you catching on to your job and are you becoming productive enough to be a profitable piece of our machinery. The fit is culture. How's your attendance? How are you getting along with others? Are you playing well in the sandbox? And if you give a simple rubric to the supervisors and sit them down with just a very short little list of how many of their new reports and say, okay, let's talk about Sally. How's Sally doing? Give me a 1 to 10. I'd say really well, maybe an 8. Well, last month you gave her a 4. What's the difference? Well, she's been catching on better. We talked about how she's doing with her interpersonal relationships, and she's making an effort and improving. I think she's coming along now. So here you're having a conversation with supervisors exactly down the road of what we were just talking about. Paying attention to people. How are you doing it? Are you guiding them? Are they making it? And if not, what are we doing about it? Boy, does it elevate the role of the supervisor in their own minds.
So, Steve, it strikes me that's not just a score that's being shared. It's backed up by evidence. It's backed up by facts.
Yep. And now, because these meetings happen with the HR people present, the HR people are making notes. So now you have notes, right? How important is that? Yeah. So, we came up with this because I'm in the staffing business and we wanted to help our clients get through that first 3 months because that's the contingent period. So we're trying to show them ways to make decisions about whether you want to bring our employees into their payroll, into their family at the end of that 3-month period. So it turns into not just creating a recognition of where the new talent stands. It creates options for intervention, nurturing, developing, and protecting yourself legally. So as you take those kinds of actions, yes or no actions with regard to whether they're going to stick, whether they're going to make the traveling team, it gives you a basis from which to make the decisions.
So this becomes a tool that the organization uses to determine who they're going to keep. Who's going to be that long-term fit. And certainly in the industry you're in, that first 90 days where they could convert the employee or convert the staffing member to an employee.
Right.
It's certainly relevant. How is this applicable to the traditional organization that's hiring? It seems like it would be equally important to rate, review, have your metrics, have your tools.
Yeah, it's not this simple, obviously, but basically one of the points here is that the first 3 months is a little bit different than the next 9 months, and maybe even a year is different than the end of the second year or third year. But there are differences in these periods based upon how long they've worked there. And the first period has these additional risks, not the least of which is you don't want to have someone in your organization over the longer period that isn't contributing to your productivity, your efficiency, your scalability, your profitability, and all of the things that people in the corner office want to see you develop as an HR group. By the way, maybe it's obvious, but now HR is not an expense anymore. HR is a part of what makes that company great.
You're right. It's an investment because they oversee the company's greatest asset, the people.
Absolutely. So if we turn these expenses, these salary or staffing expenses, payroll, if we turn this into an investment, what we wind up doing is we identify the issues or lack thereof, positive, negative. We identify them early. But you can't do that unless you're intentional about the way you measure and review and discuss and apply. We nurture those with a knack and a fit. We release those without it quickly, respectfully. And we manage towards stable, productive work groups that are highly efficient and effective. And when HR does this, they become an important piece of the process that makes the company succeed. When HR doesn't do this, what do you get? Higher turnover. Kind of a level of chaos and going on all the time, right?
Litigation.
Yeah.
Yeah. The advantages of this, of course, are the supervisors get anchored to their goals. In some businesses, supervisors don't even seem to have goals. Nobody's gone up to him and said, how's Sally doing?
That's very fair.
You just don't want Sally to become a replaceable cog in the machine. She's a human resource.
That's great. So, Steve, maybe you could share some, this has been intriguing, but share some final thoughts. Help us wrap up these concepts.
Absolutely. So the first 3 months, they're not a test. They're an elevated risk and investment window to be managed. Talent acquisition is not just about headcount. It's about recruiting great talent and nurturing it toward an outstanding ROI. And it's about turning the HR department into an important piece of what makes the business profitable over the long time. Help the people in the corner office build equity in the business. A business that is functioning on this level is far more valuable than a company that's not. And by the way, you're better than your competitors. If you're in the type of business where you're manufacturing something, for instance, and you're going to another party and selling what you're manufacturing, or you're an outsource and you need to have a pretty sharp pencil with the things that you do, how do you get that sharp pencil? Efficiency. The dollar invested creates more output of the widgets. And you put your competitors in a very difficult position. So maybe your competitors are putting you in a difficult position. The way to turn that back around is to have this very significant investment that you're making in your business, one of the top three, often number one.
Yep.
Make that more efficient. That's where the opportunity lies in the business, not by getting a little bit better deal on your plastic pellets.
It's your moat.
What's that?
It's your moat.
It's your moat. Yes,
Yeah.
It is your moat. That's right. So there you go.
Thank you, Steve. Kathleen, Stephanie, any parting thoughts on this topic?
I think it's a great conversation to just talk about how important those first days are. I mean, this clearly is already a topic within the HR space, but I think the way you really outlined it, I like the knack and the fit, and really how, beyond just HR person, how leaders really have an important part in this. So good things.
Yeah, and I would emphasize those first 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days are really important for human resources also to be responsive and manage risk. Because there is risk in those first 90 days. And so in addition to investing in the human resources department, because labor is often your number one expense, in addition, HR plays a very important role in managing risk during that time period.
Yeah, no question. HR has traditionally managed risk, and what I'm suggesting is that HR also create profit for the business in a way that's better than the competitors. And that's what gives the business the opportunity to succeed in the face of their competitors.
That's great. Steve, I love the discussion you've had with us today, leading us through this first 3 months. It's causing me to think about the importance of the role that we all play in helping that new hire to be successful. For risks and rewards and ROI, no question, it's something we need to pay attention to. Thank you for putting these thoughts together for us.
Thank you, Ron.
Stephanie, Kathleen, thank you for your input as well. I love this is where this was founded, is we just had good conversations. And I love the fact that we can have these, although on cameras with microphones, this is where it all began, and this is so fun to do. Now, before we sign off, I want to set up our next topic. Stephanie, will you tell us what's coming?
Yeah, we're going to be discussing mind at work. More specifically, mental health.
Mental health, mind at work. So I look forward to our next episode where Stephanie will help facilitate that topic. But before we go, remember, you can help us keep these conversations going by subscribing to this podcast on YouTube and following it on Spotify. We are there. If you subscribe and follow, these will come right to your inbox. We look forward to continuing to produce these for you. And thanks to everybody here for today's episode of Smarter HR Podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.